How do you use movement practices like yoga asana, strength training, even walking or running to make anti-fragile the default setting in your body, mind, and nervous system? That's what we'll look at today. We've spent a lot of time unpacking antifragility, what it is, how do we build it, how do we live from that place of becoming better through stress, challenge, and change. We've also looked at why it's so challenging. Why do we freak out in the face of change? And that took us through the 4 stages of competency. Mount stupid, what we have to navigate when we're trying to change. Also, how to wrestle with the nervous system during change and what happens in the brain. All of that has led to 3 key factors for becoming anti-fragile. The 3 things are rewiring your nervous system and being able to self-generate safety, embracing change so you move from force into power, and then transforming your identity so that the new change you're seeking is not just something you do, but it is who you are becoming. We're going to look at 3 practices and how they can serve us to create an inner environment of anti-fragility. So anti-fragile becomes the default intuitive response when we're encountering stress, strain, challenge, or change. But before we get to the 3 practices, let's look at how we generate healing through the body. These are some quick sound bites from over 20 years of teaching and literally watching thousands of people move and breathe for healing. And number 1 is healing happens through the body, not to the body, not for the body, not despite the body, but actually through the body. And that means we want to honor and really be with our body, develop a relationship with the body. Then healing can happen anywhere. It can happen on the yoga mat, it can happen on a walk, it can happen with myofascial release, it can happen even during strength training at the gym. For many years, I was more or less addicted to the yoga asana practice because it was the only place I felt certain things, connected, clear in my body, calm in my mind and nervous system. So I would have to do very long, vigorous practices to just feel okay, for that to be my baseline. Over time, I was able to integrate those experiences from the mat so that that was my default setting. And then healing and those experiences of being connected and integrated were experiences I could get from other things, but that took time. And it also took a mindset shift that I didn't need to go through this practice to get it, that yes, the practice helped set the stage for it, but I was able to self-generate those experiences. As soon as I was able to reclaim that power and agency, healing could happen anywhere. And that's been very exciting, especially as I've done more strength training over the last few years. I've been able to find connection, integration, wholeness, even work out asymmetries and or pain or little tweaks in the body through strength training while doing quite heavy, big lifting. Very, very cool. And that ties us into our next point, which is the higher the risk, the higher the reward. When I was trained in therapeutics, there were often people who would experience breakthroughs in their body in unusual places, like healing a shoulder injury in a handstand or headstand, having their back sort itself out during like a squat or a back bend. And this idea of the higher the risk, the higher the reward is that the more load, the more intense something is, there's more necessity for good alignment. And the body loves to be connected and integrated and find that place of wholeness, completeness, and it'll like soak it up. And what's surprising is that thousands of repetitions of misalignment create a groove. But because the body knows and seeks wholeness, when you do something with really good alignment, and sometimes the higher risk forces you into that place of good alignment, the body just snaps into a different relationship with itself and it sticks. It sticks because our body is seeking wholeness, connection, integration, and even healing. And we want to create the circumstances, environment for that to happen. And sometimes that higher risk just asks more of you, so you get more reward too. Something from the Ashtanga tradition is this saying that every injury is an opportunity. And sometimes that was taken flippantly and people would just buzz through their practice and keep going. But it's an opportunity to look for misalignment, disconnection, incoherence, muscles that aren't turning on, others that are overworking. So every injury is an opportunity for healing, for reclaiming connection in your body. A key to healing is being able to assess and administer the right dose. We've talked about this a lot with hormetic stress. And When your body is freaked out, scared, in a sympathetic state, it cannot accept healing. It's shut down to a certain degree. When you're in that open, spacious, receptive place, that's when the body can receive more and is more likely to find that connection and coherence. Even those two tracks of the nervous system put you in a different place with the mind. The sympathetic state is looking for enemies, looking for threats, guarded. The ventral vagal, that openness, spaciousness, is looking for connection, pattern recognition. Dose has a lot to do with the state of your nervous system in that moment. And if you're looking for healing, you want to be doing things and maintaining that ventral vagal open, spacious state. And this requires discernment. Discernment is your ability to walk that razor's edge to sort through things. And what I've seen in teaching discernment is that students get concerned because they don't have an answer. They don't have a do this, take that, yes, no, right, wrong. They're in that place of splitting hairs. And it's uncomfortable, but when you're on the razor's edge, when you're exercising a high level of discernment, that is just what it takes. It's what's right now, in this moment, with where I'm at. It's not some black and white, applies to everything answer. Exercise discernment when you're looking to create healing through the body, when we're using movement practices for building anti-fragility. Another important key is you only see by looking. This sounds obvious, but sometimes I'll tell stories of healing or working things out in my body, and students will respond as if I have some special capability or skill or unique talent. And it's just that I've spent 20 years really looking, and I'm willing to look. I'm willing to sense and feel in my body. For example, I had this catch in my piriformis. It was kind of biting and grabbing at me, and I was rolling. I saw a chiropractor after a while. No one could really open it up. And then I was curious, watching, looking. I'm like, okay, it only grabs and catches when it's behind me in extension. Think warrior 3, no other places. And that could be in a lunge as well, which I was doing a lot of. And I was doing like a single leg squat. And I recognized that if I pressed on like the inner crescent of my left heel, this whole area of my left hamstring would light up. And it wasn't like a single muscular area. It was more connective tissue. It was like a very vague shape, almost like a county, like a just general area. And I could feel it engage. And it took that bite out of the piriformis. I was only able to do this, to discover this, because I just kept looking. I stayed open. I was willing to be in a place of unknowing so I could make discoveries. It was no special power. I didn't know where to look, but I just kept looking. So I encourage you to do that too, especially when you're trying to heal or develop or integrate something in your body. Lastly, willingness is the threshold of power. Again, that story of looking, it was my willingness to be in the unknown, to be with what is, to sense and feel, that took me into a discovery. And willingness is where we shift into power states versus force. And that's something we will discuss more. So that's a little rundown on healing through the body. And now we're going to look at specific practices, yoga asana, strength training, cardio practices, and how they generate a foundation and inner ecosystem for anti-fragility. We have to go back in time with yoga asana because the original intention and vision of the practice is very different than what we see in modern studio classes. Historically, yoga asana was part of a vast array of practices. Yoga is like an umbrella term, and it was a rigorous, stringent spiritual discipline. It wasn't self-care or wellness. It was not to feel good or to stretch or to relax. It was a very rigid path for achieving freedom or enlightenment. I'm going to break down some major texts and talk about how posture practice showed up in them, and then contrast that with modern yoga. A very commonly cited text in modern yoga is Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And in that text, asana is only mentioned one time, and it's mentioned as a posture for meditation. And that posture, that seat, is meant to be sthira, steady, grounded, and sukha, easeful, open. And that's all we hear about yoga asana. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras are mostly about priming the mind and practicing for this transformation of identity and being able to access spiritual power. We see something similar in Hatha Yoga. In Hatha Yoga, the postures are used for cleansing, training, and preparation. The body is used and to a certain degree overcome in order to harness spiritual power. In the tantric tradition, things get a little bit different because the body, rather than something to overcome, becomes a vehicle for experiencing and facilitating transformation. And then finally, in the Kashmir Shaivism tradition with the teacher Abhinavagupta, we see practice and the body as an opportunity for experiencing oneness, wholeness, and completeness. And let's just again review. Posture for meditation in order to harness the power of the mind and have a transformation of identity. Posture for cleansing, training, and preparation to transform the identity. So just reflect on that. Historically, the practice was used to train the body mind and create more freedom, liberation, possibility, and transformation. How would you describe modern yoga? Is it doing that, or has it just become exercise? And then how do we actually get back these transformative benefits of practice? I love this slide. I love this image because it shows you just how wild the posture practice used to be. You see the yogi hanging from the tree, standing in fire, levitating on their head. So we do see this kind of use of the body for transformation, but very, very different than modern poses, and especially the aesthetics we see with modern poses. It's about doing the thing, doing it right, doing it well, it looking nice, versus the inner alchemy that's meant to be happening. Another thing to note about yoga history is much of it is associated with renunciates, sadhus, sannyasins, tapasvins who gave up the world, gave up an average daily householder life so they could pursue ardently these spiritual practices. And then they're using physical hardship to overcome the body and mind and to gain spiritual power. And this is something that shows up in the culture of India, but even in the mythology. And the word commonly used with these disciplines and hardships is tapas, which means to rub. It's friction, it's cooking, it's heating things up. And the physical discomfort and challenges were used to burn away impurities of the mind and the body and the ego. And posture is, again, a little bit a part of that, but only to facilitate this inner transformation. It wasn't until the Hatha Yoga Pradipika around 5th century AD that postures start to play a bigger role in the practice. And even with Hatha Yoga, when we are seeing more poses, they're being used to purify the body, balance energy, endure discomfort, train the senses for meditation, like your ability to focus and draw awareness inward. And then there's also some interesting statements about using the body in the different seats, the different postures to like align yourself for different frequencies. So it's like you're using the body as a tuning fork. Now, Tantra is a little bit different than the renunciate systems. The renunciates were very focused on enlightenment, kind of extinguishing, blowing out the ego and the individual self for transcendence, getting up and out of the world. Tantra is going to say we're after freedom, liberation in this life, in this body, and immanence, being more in the world, connected to our own aliveness and the aliveness of everything around us. And Tantra takes off around the 5th century AD. Really, its peak is around the 12th century AD. With this vision of liberation and transformation, the body and senses are seen as a path, not an obstacle. And there's great emphasis put on building up the energy inside of us through asana, pranayama, mudra, bandha. And again, those practices are not used for the body, not used for health, but building the energy inside and then directing that towards awakening. Part of the liberation process in the Tantra tradition is what I might call deconditioning. So unraveling your programming around good, bad, right, wrong, like, dislike. And that's where you see wild practices, for example, like meditating in graveyards, eating out of skulls. And it's so that we're able to harness the energy of what is, rather than be in a place of pushing away or reaching and grabbing. And notice the willingness there, because that puts us in a place of power. Now, the high point of Tantra is with a teacher, Abhinavagupta, and he was actually trained in multiple systems. He's often associated with Kashmir Shaivism. And this is where we start to see texts that read a lot like quantum physics, that everything is consciousness vibrating at different frequencies. And then all practices are designed to get you into that field of oneness, wholeness, and completeness. Everything is to cultivate an experience of oneness, wholeness, and completeness. And again, that's a place of power. That's a place of being willing to be with what is. That is wildly anti-fragile. After looking at just a few examples of yoga history, you can see how much modern yoga has deviated from the intentions of the tradition, especially in Americanized studio classes. There's an emphasis on a feel-good flow. There's pop music playing, which a lot of external stimulation makes it very difficult to go in to harness the energy of the body, mind, and spirit. And then even the poses have tended to be crowd-pleasing. So there's not a lot of challenge, difficulty built in, especially after the first 3 months or 3 years of practice. And then the fast pace, short holds, lack of alignment and awareness building diminishes the power of the practice to transform the body, to create something new out of you. And then without time for discussion, teachings, the encouragement of discernment, and a clear path of progress, I don't think the modern studio practice can live up to the promise of the tradition, which is this inner transformation and building of anti-fragility. So what do we do about that? I do think we can reclaim the power and potential of the yoga asana practice, but it takes returning to the intentions of the tradition and also embracing modern science. And I think the practice is unique in that it explicitly states wanting to work on you at the level of the body, mind, and the spirit. And we work on the body through the postures, the transitions. There's disorientation and challenge, which builds strength and awareness. There's a lot of neurological dexterity in the practice, again, with awareness, with newness, with practicing balance, with our breathing. And then there's nervous system calibration with awareness, breathing, especially during discomfort and challenge. And note that awareness shows up over and over and over again. And I think that's what the mind-body practices really cultivate. And we can also take them into more challenging practices, more physically demanding practices like strength training or running. Let's look at what science has to tell us about yoga asana so we can lean into the practice for those benefits. In many, many studies, it's shown that yoga asana leads to better regulation of the sympathetic nervous system and the HPA axis. The HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And basically, it's how your body responds to stress and produces stress hormones. So when we have HPA axis dysfunction, it's like we can get triggered easily and the body goes into a stress response very quickly, 0 to 60 or not at all. What we want to see with the HPA axis is that it can take stress and it doesn't send your body on that 0 to 60 trajectory. HPA axis plays a big role in metabolism. It influences obesity, but especially immune function. Along these same lines, yoga asana is shown to reduce cortisol and inflammatory markers. Another interesting study shows that interventions like office yoga produce significant reductions in blood pressure, heart rate, and perceived stress. That's an interesting study because it shows that there's immediate benefits and it doesn't take a lot of time or effort. Another interesting study shows that with long-term practice over a year, there's an increase in gray matter, brain matter, in particular in the sensory motor complex, the interoceptive regions, emotional regulation, and with executive function. We also see a thicker cerebral cortex, which is the area that bridges the sides of your brain and the hippocampus. So this creates better memory, better attention, better stress response. And then in terms of neurochemistry, we see an increase in GABA, which creates calm, serotonin, which helps regulate mood, and then dopamine for motivation. So yoga asana becomes an amazing playground for developing anti-fragility. It helps with your inner awareness, your ability to sense what's going on inside of you. Also your witnessing awareness. And I would say witnessing awareness is different than inner awareness in that it's like you notice things inside of you, but also outside of you. It's that witnessing awareness that allows you to be with someone who's angry or reactive and you don't respond in kind. Yoga asana also develops proprioception, your body's sense of balance and responsiveness in time and space. The practice also promotes poise, your willingness to be with what is and respond gracefully. The yoga asana practice is also unique in providing a philosophical framework for seeing yourself and the world differently. It's asking you to see with more connection, more wholeness, more completeness, more generosity. Also in the practice, there's an emphasis on process and being in that ongoing process rather than perfection, achievement, outcome. And our Western mind is very oriented towards productivity, achievement, outcome, which makes it difficult to be in the process of change and transformation. So a lot to learn from the practice. We see similar benefits with strength training. For example, improved HRV, heart rate variability, which leads to more adaptability in the face of stress. Strength training also decreases cortisol. There's a study that points to a blunted HPA axis response. So again, it's slowing down that knee-jerk reaction to stress, almost tamping down the 0 to 60 response of stress hormones in the body. Strength training also builds and boosts brain chemicals, in particular BDNF, which basically allows your body to create more neurons and the health of your neurons. It also releases dopamine and serotonin and reduces inflammation with adaptive oxidative stress. Now you can see the scientific benefits of strength training, but again, there's this idea of using the practice as an anti-fragile playground. And one of the ways we do that is with load. Load is how we're weighting, how we're carrying something, and there's endless variations and variety of load in the strength training practice. And all those variations and variety will teach you new and different things of your body. Strength training is unmatched at transforming your identity into someone who does hard things and someone who is strong. The strength training practice is also excellent because it's adaptable. You can change the load, change the things you're doing to respond to the unique needs of your body. With strength training, there's also an easy translation from outer strength to inner strength. You develop that strong physical body, and it's much easier to feel strong inside. And then when we bring the inner awareness, the alignment, agility, and the emphasis on process over outcome that we get from yoga asana, I think strength training can be taken to a whole new level, and it also becomes much more sustainable. A few things on the science of cardio. So this would be walking, running, cycling. The side-to-side eye movement, especially when we're walking, tamps down the amygdala, that hypervigilant fear response. So very powerful for setting us up for calm and responsiveness rather than reactivity. Walking is also shown to improve HRV, heart rate variability, and decrease cortisol. Interesting side note, walking or doing cardio in green spaces is proven to have more benefits than walking or doing cardio inside. There's really a whole host of health benefits that are immeasurable, but obviously noticeable when we're outside in nature. We are really creatures of nature, but we've created these boxes and indoor spaces that are really unnatural. So as soon as we get out into the natural world and do these movement practices, we see great amplification in benefits. I'm sure you're seeing common denominators with the scientific studies on these practices. Basically, it's pointing to the fact that all movement practices prime your body, brain, and nervous system to be more adaptive to stress, to have an anti-fragile internal environment. So that becomes your default, intuitive, obvious response. So you become anti-fragile not through willpower or grit, but because your inner ecosystem is ready for it. So what does this mean for practice? Basically, movement practice is a training ground for becoming anti-fragile, and you lay the foundation for anti-fragility to be the intuitive and obvious response in your body. And the practice does not need to be yoga asana, although I do think the tradition has a unique perspective because of the body, mind, spirit emphasis, and it's always been geared towards transformation. So how do you apply this? I encourage you to ask, what movement practice gives you the most mental, emotional agility? How do different practices feel and influence you? Can you see different practices as different and unique tools? For example, I used to spend a lot of time practicing yoga asana, and that's where I could really stretch and challenge myself and build anti-fragility, build this mental, emotional dexterity. Now, partially due to my age, which includes preparing for menopause, I spend more time with strength training. And that's where I'm challenging and pushing myself. I still do yoga asana largely as a way to work out asymmetries in the body, build awareness, and build a strong foundation of stability for the strength training. So they're different tools. I use them differently. They have changed over time with my age and the changing needs of my body. And then walking's a way to set the stage for my nervous system for the day. I often do that in the morning or the evening or when I just need to clear my head and refresh my mind. How do you know this is alive and activated inside of you? You move and breathe not just for exercise, but for anti-fragility. You embrace the challenges of movement practice because you know there are multiple layers of benefit, and you engage with movement strategically. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you like this, you know what to do. You can subscribe below. You can connect with us through the community. And if you're interested in building strength and anti-fragility, we have a unique style of movement practice. We call it Asana Strong. It's intended to blend the best of both worlds, yoga asana and strength training, so you can get strong without the gym, without giving up your practice. The link is in the description below.